Forget the forums and YouTube comments. Today I'm sharing my real-world review of the Suzuki DR-Z400S on and off-road. I'll go over its strengths, weaknesses, and most importantly, who this bike is actually for. Let's start with a bit of background. Released in the year 2000, the DR-Z400 was Suzuki's answer for trail riders who wanted a modern dual sport that blended reliability with performance. Suzuki didn't hold back. It came equipped with a new 398cc liquid-cooled dual overhead cam engine that delivered strong, usable power. That motor was paired with a chassis inspired by Suzuki's RM motocross bikes of the time, using a chromoly steel frame and an aluminum subframe. While it was never meant to be a race bike, there was no denying it was competitive, and more importantly, it was exactly what most riders were looking for. A machine that could handle just about anything, weekend after weekend. It didn't take long for the DR-Z to become a hit, and over time, it earned legendary status in the dual sport world. Before getting into the review, I want to add a bit of context on where I'm coming from and why I think this perspective might be useful. I'd consider myself an intermediate dual sport rider. I'm comfortable riding most types of terrain, and I've got plenty of seat time, but I'm definitely no pro. Most of my rides are full day outings, split evenly between pavement and dirt, which puts me right in line with how a lot of people actually ride these bikes. And that's exactly the point of this review. One of the first things you'll notice when you sit on a DR-Z400 for the first time is how cramped the cockpit feels. I'm 5'10", and my knees sit high, while my chest feels a bit close to the bars. The shifter is also very close to the foot peg, which can get annoying when you're wearing proper MX boots. Overall, the bike feels a little tight, especially when you compare it to something like a CRF 300L or even a DR-650. Seat height isn't terrible for someone my size, or anyone with previous dirt or dual sport experience, but for beginners or shorter riders, it's definitely something to be aware of. In the stock seat, honestly, it's not great. It's narrow and transfers a lot of vibration into your body, which becomes noticeable on longer rides. The good news is that most of these issues are easy to address with aftermarket parts. Bar risers, a longer shift lever, things like that. I'm mentioning it because there's a good chance these things will bother you as well, especially if you're doing full day rides. Once you add bar risers, standing on the bike feels good. You can grip the tank well with your knees, and the riding position really comes alive. That's where the DR-Z starts to shine. Riding hard off-road, or working through slower, more technical terrain. One thing that often gets mentioned with the DR-Z is its weight, but more so, how top-heavy it is. In off-road, there are moments where it can feel like the bike wants to flop over, especially when turning hard and soft sand or hitting obstacles at the wrong angle. In those situations, it can feel heavier and a bit less stable than some of the other bikes I've ridden. For comparison, a CRF 300L is very close in weight on paper, but it carries that weight much lower. Because of that, it feels more planted and noticeably lighter when picking it up. That said, the steering on a DR-Z is still very good. It feels flickable both on and off-road, has a tight turning radius, and the bike is very narrow, which is a big advantage on single track. Another standout feature is how stiff and solid the chassis feels. The frame and fork feel substantial and extremely responsive. A great example is riding through a rock garden. The bike feels rigid and precise, which is very confidence-inspiring. If I compare that to my first-gen KLR, which feels much more flexible and vague when you're bouncing through rough terrain, the difference is pretty significant. When I first got my DR-Z, I was honestly a little disappointed with the stock power delivery. Throttle response wasn't very smooth, and there was a noticeable on-off sensation. After doing the 3x3 mod and installing a JD jet kit, things improved significantly. The bike runs much smoother and feels more responsive, while that on-off feel never fully disappears. It's far less noticeable once properly jetted. The engine has plenty of low-end torque and continues pulling nicely as you rev it out. The power band is wide, usable, and genuinely fun. Off-road, having access to that torque is great. It's enough to float through sand, lift the front wheel over logs, and if you're not careful, get you into trouble. One complaint I do have, and this is especially true as a Canadian rider, is cold weather. In near freezing temperatures, the DR-Z can be finicky and takes a while to warm up. That's just part of owning a carbureted bike. The 5-speed transmission is smooth and well geared for acceleration, but it's a weak point on the street. At highway speeds, the engine feels busy, and longer pavement stints aren't very enjoyable. In comparison, bikes like the CRF250L or CRF300L are much more pleasant at higher speeds. Their 6-speed transmissions make up for their lack of power when it comes to road riding. This is another area where the DR-Z really shines. Out of the box, the suspension performs very well. Compared to other unmodified dual sports I've ridden, it's on a completely different level. A 300L or KLR 650 doesn't even come close in stock form. The DR-Z feels like it has far more suspension travel and does a much better job at soaking up impacts. While you'll eventually find its limits if you start launching it off big jumps, for slower, technical riding, rock gardens, roots, uneven terrain, the suspension is fantastic. There's also huge aftermarket support if you want to take it even further. Ground clearance is excellent. Logs, rocks, and other obstacles are rarely an issue, and this is another area where it noticeably outperforms something like a 300L. As far as the brakes go, I have no complaints. They offer plenty of stopping power and feel great. There is no ABS on a DR-Z, so that is something to keep in mind. However, I wouldn't worry about it. Fuel range is one of the DR-Z's biggest weaknesses. Between its relatively thirsty engine and the small, stock fuel tank, range is limited, both before and after the 3x3 mod. I regularly find myself hitting reserve or running out of fuel. I consistently get around 180 kilometers per tank, which just isn't enough for the kind of trail riding I do. Any longer rides mean carrying extra fuel, which is something to keep in mind. Over the 2 years I've owned my DR-Z, it's been very reliable. I've pushed it hard, buried it in the mud, ridden it in the snow, and done plenty of deep water crossings, and it hasn't skipped a beat. It is a bit more finicky than a fuel-injected bike, but once you understand the basics of a carburetor, it's easy to live with. Maintenance isn't overly demanding and is comparable to other bikes in its class. When it does come time to work on it, there's an enormous amount of information available online, which leads us into the next section. Because the DR-Z has been around for so long and developed such a cult following, the aftermarket support is massive. You can turn a DR-Z into almost anything. A supermoto, a lightweight ADV, a rally bike, the options are endless. With the right mods, like an FCR39 carb or a big bore kit, it's also possible to make very respectable power gains. Few dual sports offer this level of flexibility. Now, what does this all mean? On pavement, the DR-Z wouldn't be my first choice. The cramped ergonomics, limited fuel range, and 5-speed transmission all work against it. At higher speeds, vibration and gearing make longer rides tiring. Because of that, I also wouldn't recommend it as a touring bike. It doesn't feel great when loaded with luggage and lacks the comfort needed for long days. If you live far away from trails or spend most of your time on pavement, something like a CRF300L makes more sense. Where the DR-Z does work is for short commutes during the week and dirt-focused rides on the weekend. Off-road, the DR-Z is an absolute gem. For a street-legal bike, it's about as capable as it gets, and for the money, it might be the best option out there. With a good set of tires, it feels planted, playful, and confidence-inspiring in difficult terrain. A stock 300L doesn't come close here. Both bikes can reach the same places, but the DR-Z does it more easily and in a way that feels a lot more fun. It loves to be revved out, rewards aggressive riding, and just keeps going. It's reliable, tough, and will happily take a beating all day. Just keep an eye on your fuel level. The DR-Z400 has earned its legendary reputation for a reason. It's a fantastic bike that offers excellent value. If you're looking for a street-legal trail bike with a sporty off-road focused feel, the DR-Z is hard to beat. However, if you're after a true 50-50 dual sport, plan on doing longer pavement rides, or prioritize comfort, there are better options available. What do you think of the DR-Z400? Did I miss anything? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this review and like grassroots dual sport and ADV content, consider subscribing and checking out my other videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.